theyeshiva.net.
I would like to add that it is fascinating that our sages in a sukkah called Ma'aseh Merkava Davar Gadol and Havayas Dabaye Virava Davar Katan. And this created a tremendously fascinating and interesting conversation among the sages throughout the generations. What is the meaning of this? The Rambam here himself addresses it and says you have to begin to fill your stomach with meat and bread, even though the Chachamim called it a davar katan. It's a small thing relative to Ma'aseh Merkava, but still, this is what makes a person settle. This is what gives you a normal, established life. This is what allows you to experience Elam Haba. This is something that can relate to all Jews under all circumstances. The Kesef Mishneh here, the commentary of Rabbi Yosef Karo on the Rambam, right here in Perek Daled, quotes quite a few sources, some who are quite critical of the words of the Rambam, of how he explains that it's a davar katan, it's a small thing. But I want to share with you an extraordinary, fascinating interpretation of the Shalah. The Shalah was one of the great figures in Jewish history, Rabbeinu Yeshaya Halevi Horowitz. He wrote a book called Shnei Luchos Habris, and in a section called Sefer Toldos Adam, the Shalah was born in Prague. He was also the rabbi in Frankfurt and other communities, and ultimately Yerushalayim, Tzfas, Tveria. He passed away in Tveria, where he's buried in the year 1630. He's known as the Shalah. Shalah writes something very powerful, what this means. He says, and I quote, he says, this explains to you, Inyan Nigla V'Nister Shel Kol HaTorah Kula. These two words, Davar Gadol and Davar Katan, give you a holistic perspective of what is Nigla and what is Nister in all of Judaism. He says, the world thinks, I'm quoting, Nister is a different world than Nigla. There is the revealed part of Torah, what we might call Mishneh, Gemara, Tanakh, Halacha, Rashi, Tosfos, Rishonim, Achronim, Shulchan Aruch, commentaries of Shulchan Aruch, that's called Nigla. And then there's Nister, the concealed aspect, the esoteric aspect of Torah. Basically, Kabbalah, deep, mystical, spiritual, transcendent ideas. He says, Ze'enai, it's not true. Hanister nis'ave v'nisgashem v'zehu giluya. Nigla and Nister are actually exactly identical. Nigla is the way the Nister assumes a physical, concrete incarnation. Understand the profound idea of the Shalah is saying. Every idea in Nigla, every Rashi, every Tosfos, every Rashba, every Ramban, every Rabbi Akiva Eiger, every Noida B'Yehuda, every Chassam Sofer, every Reb Chaim, every line in Mishneh, Gemara, Rishonim, Acharonim, Sha'al S'Tshuvos. Whatever it's explaining, it's really Nister. It's really a spiritual, metaphysical, transcendent idea in the world of philosophy, theology, spirituality, psychology, Avodas Hashem. It's really addressing a spiritual, divine, infinite truth. The way it assumes, it's nis'ave and nisgashem. It assumes a concrete, physical manifestation. He says that's pshat davar gadol and davar katan. How can Chazal call Havayas Dabaye Virava davar katan? He says Zeu chayenu v'erich yameinu v'yasid v'yisod shakal talaboy. This is our life. This is the foundation of Torah. He says this is the Yesodei, the peg, the foundation about what all of Judaism depends on. This is what Jews have been doing all their life, learning Havayas Dabaye Virava. This is a davar katan. He says, I'll explain it to you. It's a long discussion. Oops. But here's the point he makes. He says, it's like the star. He says, you look up at a star. How large is the star? A tiny star, yeah? It looks like a frisbee. How large is the sun? A basketball. Really? It's only 865,000 miles in diameter, approximately. 865,000 miles in diameter. And there are stars that are 1,000 times larger than the sun. But what do I look up? I look like a little ball. A basketball, a soccer ball, a frisbee, a bagel. Why? Because that's what my eyes do to it. Because of the distance and the ability of my perception, my retina, therefore it becomes such a small being. So from my perspective, it's small. That's what the Gemara is saying. Davar katan haviyas dabaye v'rava. Davar gadol ma'aseh merkava. It's not two separate things. What in one realm looks like a small thing, if you could see it from the heavenly perspective, you'll see it's large, it's infinite, it's cataclysmic, it's universal. On one level, it just looks like a technical halacha, some detail in muktzah, in boirer, in tumah, in tara, in nezikin, in kotchim, in taras, in zroim, it's a little din in kilayim, something about your field. It's a davar cotton. How big is an atom? But if you unleash the power of the atom, it changes the world. So the Shalosh says, davar gadol, davar cotton. From our perspective, asvara of Abaye looks like a davar cotton. Dealing with a guy who found something that belongs to somebody else. The question is, do you have to return it or not? Okay, it's a small little detail about civil life. If you could see it from the perspective of Monsey Merkava, if you can trace it back to its spiritual core, you'll see its gadol. You'll see how powerful it is, how much it contains. It contains within it the DNA of creation. It contains within it a very powerful divine truth. He says, B'chinas hamaisu davar katan amnam sharshim l'mayla b'merkava hu davar gadol v'nitzchi v'adavar katan hu mamish davar hagadol k'may garin hachita shetzamechem and shebaylas. It's like a seed of grain, a kernel of wheat. Seed. What's in a seed? Nothing. It's a tiny little thing. You plant it, and suddenly from this seed, a huge tree develops. You take a seed, sperm. Microscopically, what you have in that. That single cell, it starts replicating itself and it becomes a davar gadol. So you look at a davar cotton, you may not always see it. Looks like that star that is tiny from your perspective. But the Gemara is saying, this davar cotton, these haviyas d'Abaye v'Rava, they seem like physical, concrete halachas which deal with so many details and nuances and intricacies. You should understand, this is divine wisdom. Divine wisdom, and not just physical wisdom that relates to the physical world. But if you trace back this very idea, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It reflects and encompasses the profoundest truths of existence on every single level and strata of wisdom. This is the Shalosh's understanding, which relates very, very well to how we have been trying to see different angles and perspectives of how to learn these chapters in Rambam and how they become the foundation and the introduction to the rest of the Mishneh Torah Rambam, which really seems so different in so many ways, to the point that some people couldn't even see how these two Rambams are the same Rambam. There's the Rambam of Moreh Nevuchim and there's the Rambam of Mishneh Torah, the Rambam of the first 4 chapters. No, it's one. It's all one and the same. Davar gadol is the davar cotton. Davar cotton is the davar gadol, because it's not really cotton. It's quite gadol. It's quite gadol. And as we have spoken about in our questions and answers, I think it was chapter 3, and today I alluded to it, the system of the Galgalim, which extend over millions and billions of light years. That same system is replicated and mirrored in the tiniest atom. What's a davar cotton is really a davar gadol. Another very interesting thing I want to mention in conclusion is about the 4 elements. We have here a long discussion about Eish Ruach Mayim Afer. As I mentioned, this idea, people again associate it absolutely with Greek ideas, because the Greeks discussed this at length, the 4 elements and the quintessence. But this is something that is so frequently quoted in our sources, not just in Kabbalah and Zohar, of course, and in all the writings of the Kabbalists, but also in all the works of Jewish philosophy. And you have it already in Midrashim, meaning from the Tanoim. So just to dismiss it as, ancient science that has been disproven, I think is inadequate. But what's so fascinating, which I want to point out, is that they saw the 4 elements not just as a phenomenon that alludes to the physical world, but also as the building blocks of the spiritual world. So the Arizal says the 4 elements are associated with the 4 letters of Hashem's name, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afer. The 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. This is in the world of Kabbalah. The midos of a person the emotions and characteristics of a person are identified in the works of Reb Chaim Vital and Tanya and in other sources with these four components of Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofar. So there is a symmetry in this chemistry on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level, and on a spiritual level. That basically, in matter, there are four states of being. There are four different ways in which matter is manifested. You have the solid and the liquid and the gas and the plasma, the transforming it into energy, and you also have this not just in physical matter, but also in spiritual matter and in a person's inner emotional life. There's the Eish of the person, the Ruach of the person, the Mayim of the person, the Offer of the person. Reb Chaim Vital, the Studio Rizal, writes in Shari Kedushin, it's quoted in Tanya chapter 1, that my animal consciousness has the quality of fire, which is expressed in anger and arrogance. He says the quality of water, which is expressed in addiction to all types of pleasures. The quality of ear, which is expressed in idle talk and scoffing of others and frivolousness. And the quality of earth, which is expressed in laziness and depression. This is in my animal consciousness, which is devoid of a real substance. It doesn't believe it really exists because it doesn't feel its oneness with the source of existence. So it's always looking to fill its existence. And it does it through four different ways. One is through exalting itself over other people so I could feel superior and validated. When I become arrogant and pompous, or I get angry at you because somehow you're eroding, you're destroying my inner core, which is not real, and that's why it has to express itself in my superiority over you. Or sometimes it expresses itself in Mayim. Mayim is the opposite of Eish, right? Mayim goes down, as the Rambam says. It's basically my relationship with the external world, where I become addicted to all types of pleasures in order to fill my void. Or Ruach, which is the wind, which represents my relationship with others, but it's not a real relationship, so it's expressed itself by talking about nothing. It's fake friendships. We could make fun of other people, we mock at things, we're cynical. There's no real soul-to-soul relationship because I'm operating from a place of insecurity, because I'm only in touch with my external consciousness. And then there is who I am on my own. And on my own, I have a terrible void, and I feel lazy and I feel depressed. That's Offer, that's the earth. That's in the animal soul. When I align myself with my deeper consciousness, with my godly soul, then the fire and the water and the ear and the fire and the ear and the water and the earth are expressed in completely different ways. My Eish is my sense of passion and exaltedness, inner infinite dignity and confidence, knowing that I'm ambassador of God in this world. My Mayim is enjoying the pleasure of life as every single thing giving me an opportunity to be able to fulfill my mission and to really suck the marrow out of life by seeing the alignment between me and what I'm eating or what I'm enjoying as part of our service to God. The Ruach, my relationships with other people, which flow in a very serene and relaxed manner. Ruach is ruchnius. There is a spirit, there is an ear, there's a lightness of being, a transparency, a vulnerability between us. Is dapkus rucha berucha. You could share your soul with my soul as the wind travels and transports the energy, gas and energy. There's a real flow of energy. I could share my intimacy with you. You could share with me. V'davak b'yishtev ha'oil b'asar echad. And then there's Offer in the most positive sense, which is a very, very deep humility at my core. V'nafshi ka'offer la'kaltiya, a very, very deep humility, knowing that I'm a conduit for the divine. And my I is really just an expression of divine infinity. So these four Yesodei become four states of being. Four states not only of matter, but four states of our psyche, of how we operate. So this becomes also a major discussion in the more spiritual and mystical works of Judaism concerning the Daled Yesodei, the four elements. You're asking, at the end of Perek Daled, Halacha Yud Beis, the Rambam said that when you contemplate the creation and the spheres and the planets and all of the creations from the Malach till the person, it develops this profound love and awe of Hashem isn't this mamish redundant because he said the same thing in the beginning of Perek Beis? So why at the end of Perek Daled in Halacha Yud Beis, he mamish repeats the same thing already in the beginning of Perek Beis, Halacha Beis? He said the path to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem is to contemplate creation. It mamish seems redundant. Why does he have to say the same thing over at the end of Perek Daled? Maybe after he finished explaining everything, he started Beis, he went to Gimel, he went to Daled. At the end of Daled, he, so to speak, puts it all in a sandwich. And he tells you, remember why I'm teaching all of this to you. Not just to give a lesson in physics, or astronomy, or cosmology, or chemistry, or whatever the right name is. No. We're here on a path to cultivate Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. This is part of Jewish life. This is part of Avodas Hashem. This is part of doing a mitzvah, the Rambam says, that is serving Hashem. There's a mitzvah of knowing God. There's a mitzvah of unifying Hashem. There's a mitzvah of loving Hashem. And there's a mitzvah of experiencing awe from Hashem. I'm not just here to teach physics, astronomy, cosmology, which are amazing sciences. But this is part of halacha, sefer halachas. This is the path to experience Hashem's infinity, Hashem's wisdom, Hashem's presence in the world, and the glimmers of divine energy and truth that are manifested in every single entity on planet Earth, in the heavens, and beyond the heavens, spiritual. So the Rambam maybe is summarizing here and saying, I gave an introduction that this is the path, and that's why I'm going to give you the principles of how the world exists. He finishes discussing the principles in a general fashion, and he says, now let's summarize. Would you be able to understand it yourself? Yeah, that's why he said the principles, in order to explain to you how to love Hashem. But perhaps after he's finished everything, he says, and now let's understand why this was important. This was important because when you reflect on this, you can reach Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem. I also have another idea, and maybe this mamish makes it not redundant. At the end of Perek Dalet, Halacha Yud Aleph, he says that Ma'aseh Bereishis, you're not supposed to teach publicly, only individually, because a lot of people can't understand it. So then the Rambam may be thinking, everybody's going to ask the question, so why do you write this? And why do you start off your whole sefer with this? In fact, he himself is going to say that you shouldn't take a walk through the orchard till you don't fill your belly with meat and with bread and meat. I wanted to say meat and potato, but he says bread and meat. Lechem and basa. Potato is not something else. We didn't even know about the potato then. So why are you giving me all these 4 chapters? I said, you're telling me that you don't teach this. You don't teach this. Even Barabim. You teach a Yachid, yes. And the difference of Ma'aseh Merkava, Ma'aseh Bereit. And you put everything in there for everybody. And you said in the introduction that this sefer is la katan v'la gadol. It's for the small and for the great. Not just for the gadol. It's for the katan. And that's why it's brief, it's concise, it's organized. You're contradicting yourself. You just said we shouldn't teach this publicly. Where can you get more public than a Mishneh Torah of the Rambam? That he wanted its manuscripts should be spread to all of the Jewish people. Perhaps that's why the Rambam, to answer that question, has to say, because there's a mitzvah of Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem and Yedias Hashem and Achdos Hashem. I'm talking about L'tayel. I'm talking about drushes, long explanations, elaborations, delving into it. But a basic, fundamental understanding of the stupendous miracle of nature, of the extraordinary wisdom, brilliance, dazzling intelligence, systems, laws, embedded in all of the cosmos and in every creature and existence individually, some basic appreciation of that is a prerequisite to halacha. Yedias Hashem, Achdus Hashem, Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem, and negating any other God. That's 5 mitzvahs, 5 big mitzvahs. Of course I have to start with this. And this is for the young and for the old. There's something called L'tayel b'Pardes. Do I delve into the Pardes? This becomes a major occupation in your life. This takes over. The Rambam says, listen, it's good stuff. It's Ma'aseh Merkava, but make sure you fill your stomach with lechem and basar. This is very fascinating if this is the case, because then that Halacha Yud Beis is not redundant. He's answering a big question. You tell me that it's so limited, don't teach it, and if you teach it only to one person, you have to make sure he's the right person. Ma'aser Merkava has to understand himself, Ma'aser Bereishis you could teach him, people don't get it. How can you contradict yourself so blatantly? So the Rambam says, because when you contemplate what I wrote, you will experience Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. And then he says, this is called Pardes, and you have to know, I wrote 4 chapters, but I'm not telling you that this should become now your great occupation of Ma'aser Merkava, Ma'aser Bereishis, until you don't fill your stomach with bread and meat. I think that may be authentic. I'm not sure, but that's just a thought. Next question. So why does he say Moisef Ava L'Makam? I added that. I'm just saying, in addition to that, I think Moisef Ava L'Makam, because Moisef Ava L'Makam, I think it's because the details, which means as follows. Why do you say Moisef Ava L'Makam? He's just summarizing what he said in chapter 2. I'll tell you why he says Moisef Ava L'Makam. I think it's a beautiful word, actually. You would think, and it's actually halacha l'maisa maybe. You would think, okay, I heard this shiurim. I get the picture. And you know what? I appreciate it. I have a certain awe, reverence, love. I got it. But the Rambam gets into details in Beis and Gimel and Dalet, and each halacha is another detail, another detail, another detail, right? In other words, he's not just telling you there's good stuff going on. He gets into details, so he finishes. When you contemplate these words, which means everything of Beis Gimel Dalet, and makir kol habruyim, kol, all the creations. In Perek Beis he didn't say that. He said when you contemplate God's amazing creations and you see his infinite wisdom, you're going to right away love him. You'll right away have a craving and a thirst. Here, after I finish discussing everything in our cosmos on earth and in the spheres, and the angels, the spiritual, and the Olam HaGalgal, the world of the planets, and the celestial world, and now the earthly world, after I finish discussing everything, when you will recognize Kol HaBruyin, a malach, a galgal, an adam, which b'kayotzim by meaning. You recognize now angels. You appreciate the planets, the stars, the spheres. You appreciate living organisms down here, including animals and vegetation and mammals and fish and metals and rocks and lumps of earth and mountains, as he mentioned. Now you know everything. V'yirech achmasir shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol ha'yitzurim u'b'chol ha'bruyim. Oh, you see Hashem's chachma in all the creations, in all organisms, and in every being. A pebble, a rock, a flake of snow, a droplet of rain, a grain of sand, a blade of grass, a beating heart, the brain of an ant, the brain of a squirrel, the black hole, and a tiny groundhog digging a hole. There is the general knowledge. Every time I learn something new about Hashem's world, there's more Ava, there's more Ava, there's more Ava, there's more Ava. Once again, I re-experience that. Wow, I get in touch with divinity, with the dazzling, undefined infinity of Hashem. The wisdom of it, the beauty of it, the simplicity of it, the purity of it. When you come in contact with Elokus, there is love and there's awe. There's astonishing awe. Like I said then, Tamu Uruki Toiv Hashem, every Nivra manifests Hashem in a unique way. So it's Moisef. That's what he says here. He didn't say that in the beginning because there he was giving the introduction. So I would think, okay, I got a lot of stuff. I have Ava. So the Rambam says, no. I went through everything because I want you to know. When you learn about this, and then you learn about that, and you learn about... With each one, there's a new Ava, there's a new Isofas Ava, there's a new appreciation, which also means, fascinatingly, I once heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe of Art, he said, the way Hashem created the world is that every single being is a mashpia and a mekabel. Everyone gives and everybody takes. There's nothing in our world that's only a mekabel. It takes, but it also gives. Every nivra, everyone makes a contribution. We know how our ecosystem works and how the food web and the food chain work. Everything gives and everything takes. There's no makabla. And he said, you know why? There shouldn't be envy, foolish competition. Everyone has to know that they're contributing to the divine symphony. In other words, there's something I could learn from in every single existence that I can't learn from another existence. Everyone manifests Hashem's light in a unique way besides the common denominators that all of them are a creation of Hashem. The Chachma of Hashem is expressed in every nivra differently because of its unique, particular chemistry, physical chemistry and spiritual chemistry. And therefore it teaches me something new. It teaches me something extra. There's something new about godliness that emerges through every single person, through every single animal, through every single plant, through every single particle, through every single wave, through every single nivra, every single existence. Every molecular structure, every cellular structure, the tiny differences in DNA from one created being to another created being is another expression of Elokus, which is why Chayev Adam Loimar B'Shvili Nivra Olam, why we say about people that every person says the world was created for me. There's something at stake in your life and in your personality and in your contribution that nobody else can. We're talking about people now, but here I'm extending it to the whole Bria, Moisef Ava. I got it already. I heard a beautiful lecture. It's very nice. It's inspirational. It gives meaning to my Yiddishkeit. The Rambam says, no, every new detail is moisef. It's a kiyu mitzvahs ava. It's a kiyu mitzvahs yira. It's a new mitzvahs ava. It's a mitzvahs yira. In other words, the ideal Jew's curiosity is endless. The inquisitiveness of an ideal Jew is limitless. It's infinite. Because there is no part of our universe that doesn't have the trace of God, the imprint of God. So a Jew who wants to have a relationship with Hashem, I look at everything, and I look everywhere, and I won't stop. Because everywhere I could find another manuscript of Hashem. Imagine somebody who's in love with a great scholar, with a great sage. Somebody who's in love with the Rambam. And he hears that in the British Museum, there's a fragment of a manuscript of the Rambam that nobody ever read. How much money will this man pay to travel and to search and to bribe? I don't know if you have to do that, but to protect it with the right people to be able to see it, and be able to copy it, be able to publish. He'll do anything because I'm in love with this person. Everywhere in the world is a manuscript of the Rabbi Shalom. Everything has an imprint of his divinity. So the search, the inquisitiveness, the curiosity is endless. The Maggid of Mezrich said, we say in the morning, Mala ha'aretz kinyanecha. Mala ha'aretz kinyanecha literally means the earth is filled with your acquisitions, meaning everything you own. Koine Shemaim, you own everything. Everything belongs to you. The tree, but God owns it. The house, God owns. The basketball hoop, God also owns. The car, God owns. Okay, you own it from some perspective, but ultimately, Mala ha'aretz kinyanecha, this whole world belongs to you. It doesn't belong to me. Says the Maggid. Malars kinyanecha. It's a clip sukkah, but it's baruch Mishneh v'saretz koine shemayim v'aretz. What's the chiddush here in davening? He says Malaretz kinyanecha means, I'll say it in Yiddish, the ganze Welt is angefüllt mit Sachen, durch welche man kann dir koine sein. The world is filled with things through which we can acquire you. In other words, everything in the world is another instrument, an opportunity to acquire the Rebbeinu Shalom. Every experience, every encounter, every conversation, every moment, every circumstance that I encounter in life is another opportunity to be koine elokus, to have a relationship with Hashem. Why? Because his imprint is there. Every nivra teaches me something inspirational that somebody else can't. You'll say it's a little tiny creature, who cares? What is it? It's a bee. It's a spider. It's a flea. It's a cockroach. It's a roach. A rat. We don't like them. Every nivra has its unique manifestation of Hashem's Chochmah. So Moisef Avolamakam. The Rambam says every detail will add more and more, and therefore becomes part of a mitzvah. Halach Yud Gimel, he qualifies. He says there's something called L'tayel B'Pardes. You could delve in your whole life, dedicated to Ma'aseh Merkava, dedicated to Ma'aseh Bereishis, dedicated to study the divine and study the world, which the Rambam says is a mitzvah. Says the Rambam, but I tell you, you have to prioritize your life. You have to fill your stomach with lechem and basar, which is knowing the Ratzon Hashem, how Hashem wants you to live. As he puts it well at the end of Daled, we spoke about it yesterday, in the previous class. And then you could take a stroll in the Pardes. But the basic ideas, as I explained before, that he writes in the beginning, every person has to know it. He says, Tzarech Adam Leida Isam Tchil. You have to know this. First thing, you have to know this. I hope I answered your question. You spoke about the dot. It's called the pale blue dot. The picture was taken 30 years ago. Beautiful. The Rambam called the planets Gufim, Kedoshim, Gdoilim. 3 words. The picture of Earth taken billions of miles away really nailed our perspective. We now can really appreciate the Rambam, the person. These became fiery halachas. These 4 prakim were so exciting. Let's see how you're going to turn the ensuing halachas that I find sometimes dry into fire. Stay the course, stay the course. Haloi koi dvarai ka'esh no mashem. A halacha is dry only if you don't understand it. If you understand it, it's not dry, it's fire. Everything we do matters, considering how small the planet is in the picture. Everything we do matters. Because big things and small things are really the same. What we learn from the Rambam, you're saying, is that the biggest and the smallest are really the same. They're both really tiny. So if a big thing is significant, even a tiny thing is insignificant. Because if a big thing is not significant, if a tiny thing is not significant because God is infinite, then the biggest thing you do is also not significant because the whole planet is so tiny. The reason it's significant is because Hashem wants it, Hashem chose it, and then even the tiniest thing He also chose, which is that idea of the Galgal we spoke about, that the tiniest matter, piece of matter, which has within it a drop of water, has 5 sextillion atoms in it. That's 1 followed by 21 zeros, I think. 5 sextillion atoms in a drop of water, okay? And one atom itself is a stupendous reflection of the heavenly orbits as discussed, which means that the tiniest detail of a drop of water here on Earth is a reflection of the largest phenomena in heaven. Which is why when we drink a drop of water and we're thirsty, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shehakoil niya b'dvarei. Everything came into existence through His word. The drop of water reflects Brias ha'olam, just like the greatest and most humongous, gigantic star. We can already see subatomic particles revolving around a center. And then we know both from the Rambam and astronomy that we are on a planet, and the sun revolves around the center, as the Rambam explained. The orbit of the sun is around the center, which is the Earth. And the same is true for all other galaxies. They all have an orbit, which the Rambam says is in a sphere, which may just be the orbit in which they revolve around the center. Is it possible that we are a subatomic particle under the microscope of a much larger universe, and so on? Excellent. That's a very powerful point. In other words, just like we know the subatomic particles, the electron is revolving around the nucleus, is it then possible that the whole solar system is just like subatomic particles relative to a much higher reality? And as you go further and further and further, each one is just like one atom relative to a much larger reality. And I think that's a very powerful observation, and it's what we can learn from all of this. Just like we don't even see an atom, but it's the building blocks of matter. And then you look at the sun and it's like, wow, 865,000 kilometers in diameter. pretty big guy, As the Rambam says, 170 times diameter larger than the Earth. We spoke about the number 110, 170. It's a big number relative to Earth. Whether you talk about diameter, you want to talk about mass, you want to talk about volume. But really, relative to higher, it's just like, literally just like the electron that's revolving around the nucleus. The protons, the neutrons. That's an incredible, incredible observation. Is it possible that we are subatomic particles, we, under the microscope of a much larger universe? And that larger universe sees us as subatomic, and so on. Can there be teeny tiny, from our subjective point of view, entities dwelling on the things we call subatomic particles, peering into their instruments at yet further subatomic particles? An infinite chaining up and down of levels of existence. Well, talking about larger universes, I don't know if you mean physical universes or spiritual universes. Physical universes is a whole other discussion. Spiritual universes is a very big discussion in Kabbalah and in Chassidus and even the Rambam, the 10 levels of angels and so forth. But this concept of what seems so large from another perspective is just a subatomic particle, I think is really, really accurate and authentic. And ultimately it goes all the way to the source, that Hashem is the center, and everything revolves around that Achdus. Everything is connected and harmonized and synchronized with that unity. So it's really a picture, a very elegant picture of the physical and the spiritual cosmos. The Rambam speaks about the anthropic principle, where everything decomposes. There are scientists who believe that they were the first who claimed that point. What could have been his reaction if somebody said that the Rambam wrote about it long before? Listen, there's a lot of distinctions here, so it's a little bit more nuanced. I use the word entropy principle more in a general fashion. What about the manna? It comes down from heaven. The tablets came down from heaven. The story about the Baal Shem Tov, a note that came down from heaven that the sukkah was kosher. Are these made up of these 4 elements? Do these decompose? That's a great question. And the idea is that things that come down from heaven have a different quality. They're of a different caliber. That's true. Created Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashas, as the Mishneh says. The 4 basic elements, do they combine in endless ways in each creation? Can we align the multitude combinations of these 4 basic elements with the basic elements of DNA that also combine in endless ways to form each individual, let alone each species? I think that's 100% true. The combinations are infinite, and hence the diversity is so awesome, because the combinations are so endless, as you gave a great metaphor of DNA. I share 50% to 6% DNA with a banana, but I hope that I'm not a banana. Or not only a banana, 98% with a chimpanzee, but we're not chimpanzees. So it's those subtle distinctions that make all the difference. And yet we're all one. Because as somebody once said, I once read an article, he said, listen, I grew up as an atheist, but whether you're an atheist or a believer, you have to say one thing. However this world came into being, the entire planet was using the same dictionary. Everybody was using the same dictionary, meaning DNA. Everybody was using the same dictionary. Somehow, everyone made sure to use the same dictionary. Basara Mamoris Nivra Ha'olam. Einstein teaches that matter can be converted into energy and vice versa. If so, energy itself, whether as energy or as potential matter, or even after being converted to matter after nuclear fusion, should also be composed of the 4 elements. Is that true? Excellent question. And that's why I spoke about that some people associate the 4 elements with gas, liquid, solid, and when matter is transformed into energy, plasma. Beautiful, beautiful questions and comments and feedback. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, guys. I still don't understand. The Rambam says not to delve into all of this. So he says, don't write it, don't teach it. It's like telling a child not to do something and then you do it yourself. And then the Rambam writes it all. He should have left it out. It seems to be so complicated. That's why I explained this at length. I explained this mamish at length, that the Rambam is not contradicting himself. He wouldn't do such a thing. You see the Rambam, you see the accuracy, the meticulousness, the order, the honesty, the precision. Obviously, he wouldn't literally shoot himself in the back, say, don't teach, and then he teaches it. There's 2 completely different components here. There is L'tayel b'pardus and L'hikonis b'pardus. There's taking a stroll in the garden, and there's entering into the garden in order to get a peach. You may spend there a few minutes, but then there's Latayel B'Pardes. You spend hours and days, that becomes your hangout. That's the difference the Rambam is making here.
This class is brought to you by the Yeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.